No coloreds allowed, a family's fight for dignity. Chapter 1. A Sign in the Window. It was just a Tuesday morning when Ava Johnson skipped down Main Street on her way to fetch sugar for her mama. She always loved passing the bakery. The scent of cinnamon rolls spilled out of its windows like music. But this time, she stopped cold. The sign was new, hung up in bold block letters on the front window, "No coloreds allowed." She stared at it for a long time, sugar money clutched tightly in her small hand. A man behind the counter glanced at her, then turned away. She didn't step inside. Back home, Mama didn't look surprised when Ava told her. She simply nodded, set down her stirring spoon, and wiped her hands on her apron. "It was only a matter of time," she said quietly. At dinner that night, the family sat in heavy silence. Daddy kept cutting his meatloaf long after his plate was empty. "We've lived here 15 years, he said finally. "Now this?" Michael, Ava's older brother, slammed his fork down. "We should say something." Mama shook her head. "And they'll say we're stirring trouble. Sometimes the loudest fight is the one you fight by staying tall." The next morning, Mama walked past the bakery on her way to the cleaners. She didn't go in, but she didn't cross the street either. She made sure they saw her. So did others. In the days that followed, more signs like that appeared in windows across town. But quietly, resistance began to bloom. Miss Delia's corner store stopped selling flour from the bakery. The Reverend spoke of invisible lines drawn by cowardly hands. And Ava every day walked past the sign and held her chin a little higher. Because the sign may have been in the window, but dignity stayed in the heart. And the Johnsons weren't going anywhere. Chapter 2. Whispers. At the diner sat on the corner of Main and Carter Street, a small square building with cracked vinyl booths and the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. It was the kind of place where regulars had their own mugs, and the cook flipped pancakes without looking. It was also where gossip lived. After the sign went up at the bakery, the Johnsons became the latest topic. Their name passed across lips like steam from a cup, soft, curling, and always overheard. "Did you see her walk past the bakery? Like it didn't mean nothing. I heard the boys getting involved in that new protest group. Really should have known better than to settle here." Ava and her mother walked in one afternoon, hoping to grab lunch after picking up a dress from the cleaners. As they stepped inside, the usual chatter faded. Forks clinked, heads turned. They sat at a booth by the window, hands folded, pretending not to notice. Dolores, the youngest waitress, approached slowly. She was barely older than Michael, with kind eyes and a voice like honey. She bent down and whispered, "Just coffee? On the house." Mama nodded. That would be fine, sugar." When Dolores returned with the cups, she lingered. "They talk a lot in here," she said quietly, "but most don't see." "Not really." Mama met her gaze. "That's why we sit where we can be seen." From behind the counter, the manager glared. Dolores straightened and walked away. As they sipped their coffee, Ava noticed people watching them, not with hate, but uncertainty. Some were ashamed, some just afraid of what standing beside them might mean. Outside, the wind picked up. Mama adjusted her scarf, finished her drink, and stood tall. "We'll come back next week," she said. Ava smiled. The whispers didn't stop, but now they had names, faces, and a story no longer hidden behind closed doors. Chapter 3. Mama's Rules for Survival. The house was quiet that evening. Rain tapped gently on the roof, and the lights inside flickered every so often, as if the storm outside knew the tension brewing within. Mama stood in the kitchen, polishing the same teacup for the third time. Michael paced by the window. Ava sat at the table, eyes wide, watching them both. It was after the second diner visit that Mama called the family together. She didn't raise her voice. Mama never had to. These are the rules, she said, her voice steady and low, not because we're scared, but because we need to stay smart. Michael stopped pacing. Ava straightened up. Daddy leaned forward, elbows on the table. Rule number 1, never run. If someone says something cruel, you look them in the eye, hold your head high, but you don't run. Rule number 2, if the police stop you, hands visible. Always, no sudden moves, speak clear, be polite, even when it hurts. Rule number 3, we do not go alone to certain parts of town. I don't care if your friends live there or the store is closer. Some lines were drawn long before you were born. Ava looked confused. But why should we act like we did something wrong? Mama knelt beside her, her hand resting gently on Ava's. Because sometimes, baby, safety has nothing to do with doing wrong. It has to do with being seen. Michael's jaw tightened. That's not fair. No, Mama said softly. It's not. At night, after everyone went to bed, Mama stayed at the table. Daddy joined her, pulling out an old photo album, pictures of her father in his work uniform, her mother holding signs at marches. A family that had fought quietly for generations. These rules aren't new, she whispered. They're just ours now. And from that day forward, the rules were folded into every goodbye, every curfew, every hushed warning before the kids stepped outside, not to limit them, but to shield them, because survival in their world didn't come with fairness. It came with Mama's rules, and the courage to follow them. Mama lays down unspoken rules for staying safe in a world that sees their dignity as defiance, and teaches her children how to walk invisible lines. Chapter 4. The day the school said no. It was a sweltering August morning when Mama braided Ava's hair extra neat and packed her bag with sharpened pencils and a brown paper lunch. The new school was just 3 blocks away, closer than the old one, bigger too, with brick walls and white columns that looked like a courthouse. Ava clutched her folder to her chest as they stepped through the front gates. Other kids, dressed in freshly ironed shirts and polished shoes, gathered on the steps. Most of them paused when they saw Ava. Mama walked tall beside her, chin up, hand firm on Ava's shoulder. They reached the front office and stepped inside. A woman behind the desk looked up, then blinked slowly. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Mama said. "My daughter is here to start 5th grade. We submitted the paperwork weeks ago." The woman shuffled through a folder without looking at them. "There's been a reassignment. She's been moved to the Lincoln School on the south side." "That's 5 miles away," Mama replied, her voice steady. "District made a change. She's not eligible here." Ava felt her breath catch. She looked at Mama, who didn't flinch. "Is that so?" Mama said quietly. The woman nodded. "That's so." They left without a scene, but the pain was loud enough to carry. Back home, Eva sat on the porch steps, legs swinging over the edge. Michael stormed in from down the street, fists clenched. "And they said no?" he asked. Mama nodded. "They said no." Michael didn't speak for a long time. Then he disappeared into the house. That night, Abba heard his typewriter clacking well past midnight. The next morning, a single sheet of paper appeared on the church bulletin board. "How can't my sister go to school here?" Signed, Michael Johnson. It was just one sentence, but it said everything. And though the school still said no, the town had started to listen. 10-year-old Ava is denied enrollment at the white-only school, even though she lives just 3 blocks away. Her brother plots his quiet revenge. Chapter 5. Crossing the tracks. The train tracks sliced the town clean in two. On one side stood red brick buildings, lush lawns, and painted fences. On the other, gravel roads, tin roof houses, and porches patched with plywood. The line was more than steel, it was a warning. Michael and Ava had grown up hearing it. Don't cross the tracks unless you have to. Don't stay too long. Don't forget which side you came from. But this Saturday, Michael had had enough. The community center on the other side was holding a book drive. Ava wanted to go. Michael saw it as more than that. It was a test, a dare, a declaration. "We'll walk," he told Mama. "We'll be back before sunset." Mama hesitated but nodded. "Stay close to each other and don't let fear make your decisions." They walked with steady steps. Ava clutched a bag of books tight to her chest. As they neared the tracks, Michael slowed. He looked both ways, not for trains but for eyes. Then they crossed. The change was immediate. People on porches fell quiet. A man watering his lawn paused mid-spray. A passing patrol car slowed to a crawl. Michael kept his head high. Ava's grip on his hand tightened. They made it to the community center, and inside was warmth. A young white woman greeted them at the door, surprised but not unfriendly. Children milled about, sorting books, drawing posters. They stayed an hour, maybe two. When they left, the sun had started to dip. Walking back, they passed the same patrol car, now parked. The officer stepped out. "You kid lost?" he asked. Michael didn't flinch. "No, sir. Just heading home." The officer looked them over. "You live on the other side?" "Yes, sir." A pause, then a nod. "All right. Stay safe." He got back in his car. The tracks came into view again. Ava whispered, "Are we in trouble?" Michael shook his head. "Not today." They crossed the tracks and stepped back into their neighborhood. A few neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. Later that night, Mama kissed their foreheads and said, "Proud of you." Because sometimes walking is more than movement. Its resistance, a risky walk across town lines, brings the Johnson children face to face with the difference between freedom and boundaries enforced by fear. Chapter 6. Sunday Shoes and Protest Signs. Sunday morning at Mount Calvary Church was always a mix of reverence and routine. Choir robes rustled, hats tilted just right, and ushers nodded solemnly as they handed out hymnals. But this Sunday, something unspoken was stirring beneath the stained glass. The pews were filled, but the prayers felt heavier. After the final hymn, Reverend Tate stood at the pulpit, his Bible closed. "Before we leave today," he said, "I want to remind us that silence is not always sacred. Sometimes it's survival, and sometimes it's surrender." He paused, looked out at the faces. The bakery sign, the school refusal, the whispers and looks. These are not separate moments. They are the same storm coming closer. A murmur swept the room. In the basement after service, folding chairs formed a circle. Adults leaned forward, teens crossed arms. Mama stood near the chalkboard with a notebook. "We want to walk," she said, "peacefully from here to City Hall. No signs of anger, no fists raised, just presence." "Sunday shoes and protest signs," someone joked softly. The room chuckled, but the resolve remained. They began to plan. Michael offered to paint posters. Ava collected quotes for signs. Others volunteered to make sandwiches, to bring first aid kits, to pray. Outside, as the sun dipped low, the Johnsons walked home with quiet determination. That night, Michael painted bold letters onto cardboard. "We are not the problem, we are the proof." In the morning, Mama laid out her best dress, ironed Ava's blouse, and polished her own church shoes until they shone. The next Sunday, the march began. They didn't shout. They walked, and the town for the first time had no choice but to watch. The church becomes more than just a sanctuary. It's a place of quiet organizing and loud footsteps as the community plans its first peaceful protest. Chapter 7. The Boy with the Camera. It started with a quiet click. Terence was 15 and lived 2 houses down. Skinny, sharp-eyed, and always barefoot in the summer, he was the kind of boy folks underestimated until they saw what he could do with a camera. He had found the old film camera in his grandfather's attic and taught himself how to use it. Every day after school, he wandered the neighborhood, capturing details others missed. Mama sweeping the porch, Ava helping Miss Delia carry groceries, Michael pacing under the oak tree deep in thought. At first, the Johnsons didn't think much of it. Terence was always around, polite but curious. But one afternoon, he showed them a photo he had taken. Ava standing defiantly in front of the bakery window, the "No Coloreds Allowed" sign reflected in the glass behind her. The image stopped Mama cold. Terence looked up at her. "People need to see," he said. "Not just hear. See." Michael nodded. "You got more like that?" Terence smiled shyly. He did more than take portraits. He told stories. Photos of protest signs being painted in the church basement, of Dolores slipping free pie into a napkin for Ava, of neighbors locking arms at the march. He developed the film in his garage, hung the prints with clothespins on a wire stretched between 2 shelves. The photos began to circulate, first at church, then at community meetings. Soon one ended up in the local newspaper, credited anonymously. Eva asked him, "Aren't you scared?" Terence shrugged. "A little, but the camera makes me brave." He didn't speak much, but his pictures roared. And in a town full of closed mouths, his lens became the loudest truth of all. A neighbor's son begins documenting the family's daily life and the discrimination they endure, one photograph at a time. Chapter 8. When silence was safer. It started with a phone call at midnight. The voice on the other end didn't say a name, just breathed heavy and whispered, "Tell your boy to stop, or we'll stop him." Mama didn't scream. She hung up the phone, locked the front door again, and stood at the kitchen window until sunrise. The next morning, there was a smear of red paint on their front steps. A single word: leave. Michael wanted to shout, to go door to door, demanding who did it. But Mama said no. That's what they want. Us. Loud. Angry. Easier to blame when the fire starts. Eva didn't want to go to school. She clung to Mama's skirt, asking, "Will we be safe?" Mama only said, "We'll be seen." At the store, neighbors who once waved now averted their eyes. At church, the pew next to them sat empty. Michael was quiet that week. His posters stopped. His words stayed tucked inside. Terence stopped taking pictures. Silence wrapped around them like fog. Safer, maybe, but suffocating. Then one afternoon, Ava found her voice. She stood outside the bakery, the same one with the sign, and began reading from a book of poems. Not loud, but clear. People stopped. Some smiled, others frowned. A man across the street shouted something ugly. Mama stood nearby, arms crossed, unwavering. Michael joined her the next day. Terence took pictures again, and just like that, the silence cracked. They had learned something vital. Safety bought with silence is never freedom, and fear can only win when courage forgets how to speak. The family is forced to weigh the danger of speaking out against the quiet safety of keeping their heads down when threats start appearing at their doorstep. Chapter 9. A seat at the front. The school bus hissed to a stop, its door creaking open like it had something to say. Michael Johnson stepped aboard, and for a moment everything froze. He'd ridden this route for years, always taking a seat near the back with the rest of the black kids. That's just how it was. But today something was different. His chest burned from the words he'd heard at the dinner table last night. Ava's brave poetry reading, Mama's unwavering silence, and the slur someone had spray painted on their fence. So this morning, Michael made a choice. He walked past the back rows, past the middle, and he sat in the front, right behind the driver. Heads turned, whispers started. "What's he doing?" someone said. "He can't sit there." But no one moved. The bus driver, Mr. Ralston, an older man with tired eyes, looked at him through the mirror. "You sure about this, son?" Michael nodded. "Yes, sir, I'm just going to school." Mr. Ralston didn't say another word. He closed the door and pressed the gas. The ride felt longer than usual. When they arrived, Michael stood, grabbed his bag, and stepped off with steady feet. Later that day, he found a note tucked in his locker. No name, just a few words written in careful block letters. "I saw what you did, thank you." The next morning, another student sat near the front, then another. By Friday, the unspoken rule was broken. It didn't change the world overnight, but it changed the ride. And sometimes the front seat is more than just a place to sit. It's a place to begin. Young Michael refuses to sit at the back of the bus. What starts as a personal act becomes a symbol for others to follow. Chapter 10, They Called Him Trouble. The town square buzzed with heat and tension. It was supposed to be a peaceful rally, just signs, speeches, and songs. Michael stood near the front holding a hand-painted sign that read, "We belong here too." The crowd had gathered. Some clapped, some watched from the edges, arms crossed. A line of officers stood across the street, helmets clipped to their belts. Michael scanned their faces. Most were blank. A few weren't. As the rally wrapped up, people began to disperse. That's when the shouting started. A group of teens had begun a chant, loud, rhythmic. Michael recognized one of them, Jerem, a boy from the other side of town, angry and raw. Police moved fast. Someone shoved, someone tripped. Then came the sirens. Michael never saw the officer approach, just felt a firm grip yank his arm. "You're under arrest for inciting a riot," the officer barked. "What? I didn't." Hands twisted behind his back. Metal cuffs clicked. He was pushed into the back of a cruiser. Faces blurred past the window, some shocked, some satisfied. At the station, they took his photo, his mugshot. Michael sat in the holding cell, his sign still clutched under one arm. Hours later, Mama arrived. Her jaw clenched, eyes red but dry. "You didn't do anything," she whispered. Michael shrugged. To them, showing up is enough. The photo hit the papers the next morning. Teen arrested after protest turns chaotic. But there was something different this time. Terrence's photo snapped just seconds before the arrest. Circulated too. It showed Michael standing still, arms at his side, face calm. The town began to talk again, louder this time. And in those conversations, Michael wasn't just the boy with the sign. He was the face of a truth too powerful to ignore. Michael is arrested after being falsely accused of inciting violence. His mugshot becomes a lightning rod for the movement. Chapter 11, What the Church Wouldn't Say. It was supposed to be just another Sunday, but after the march and Michael's arrest, the Johnsons entered Mount Calvary to a wave of nervous glances. Reverend Tate offered a sermon on forgiveness, but never mentioned what the town was talking about. After service, Mama lingered in the pew, lips pressed tight. Michael nudged her gently. "We don't have to stay," he whispered. But she did. Downstairs in the fellowship hall, the talk was hushed but thick. A few members approached Mama with warm hands and stiff smiles. "You know we support your family," one deacon said, "but the church must remain neutral." Mama's eyebrows rose. "Neutral in the face of injustice?" He smiled again, nervous. "There are politics and then there is faith." Mama stood, clearing her throat. "Then, maybe, your faith needs to find its spine." The room fell silent. That week, Mama wrote a letter to the church board. She spoke of truth, of calling, of the pulpit as a platform for more than comfort. The next Sunday, she was not invited to lead prayer as usual. She sat in the back pew, hands folded, eyes forward. Whispers circled her, but so did respect. A few weeks later, during testimony time, Mama stood and spoke clearly. Our children are fighting for a future this church prays for every Sunday. If we can't name the sins of the world while inside these walls, then what exactly are we worshiping? Some looked away, some looked ashamed. One woman began to cry. And though the Reverend didn't respond from the pulpit that day, Mama's words echoed in the stained glass. Sometimes faith must be louder than fear. And truth, even when whispered, shakes the steeple. The Johnsons' church avoids taking a stand. Mama challenges the silence in a way that divides the congregation and herself. Chapter 12. Fire on the porch. The knock came just after midnight, not from a hand, but from something else, a crackling sound, the pop and hiss of fire waking the house before the smoke could. Michael was the first to the window. What he saw stole his breath. On the front porch, flames licked up the edge of a crude wooden cross, the fire casting angry shadows across the front yard. Eva screamed. Mama grabbed the phone, hands shaking as she dialed. Daddy rushed outside with a bucket, trying to smother the flames, but it was too late. The message had already burned into the wood. Neighbors appeared on lawns, silent silhouettes in the dark. No one came closer, no one offered help. The fire department arrived eventually, too late to do more than put out embers. One officer took a report, barely concealing his indifference. Michael stared at the blackened porch boards, fists clenched. They want us gone. Mama stood beside him, her voice soft but fierce. Then we stand taller. By morning, the porch had been swept clean, the cross removed, but the scars remained on the wood, in their minds, in the wary way Eva now looked out windows. The story spread fast. Not everyone believed it. Some whispered it was staged. Others nodded in grim silence. But a few brave neighbors showed up that afternoon with paint and brushes. Together, they repainted the porch. Not just to cover the damage, but to make it brighter. Because light, when shared, always finds a way to push back the dark. A burning cross appears on the family's porch in the dead of night. The town can no longer pretend not to see what's happening. Chapter 13. Letters never sent. It was on a quiet Saturday afternoon when Ava decided to help Mama clean out the hallway closet. Dust floated in the warm sunbeams, slanting through the window, and old boxes were stacked high like forgotten towers of history. At the bottom of one battered box, tucked beneath yellowed receipts and faded photographs, Ava found a small envelope. It was bound with a brittle piece of twine and sealed in a way that suggested it hadn't been touched in years. Inside were letters, handwritten on lined paper, the ink sometimes smudged, other times angry in its haste. They were all addressed but never mailed. Each one started the same, to the ones who need to listen. She read the first slowly, her fingers trembling. Her father had written them. Letters to city council, to newspaper editors, to pastors, pleading for fairness, for dignity, speaking out against the bakery sign, the school decisions, the neighborhood threats, but he had never sent them. Ava brought them to the kitchen where Mama stood peeling potatoes. She laid them gently on the table. Mama looked at the stack, her expression unreadable. I didn't know he wrote these, Ava whispered. Mama nodded slowly. He wrote every night. But he was scared, not just of them, of what it might mean for us. Ava sat down. But they matter. Yes, Mama said. And now they're yours, to carry. Later that week, Ava copied one of the letters, word for word, and posted it to the town's bulletin board. No signature, just truth. Within days, whispers began. People read it. Some tore it down. Others made copies. Her father never got to see the world his words might shape. But now, through Ava, they were no longer unsent. They were heard Eva finds old unsent letters written by her father, messages of fear, hope, and a plea for change he never had the courage to send. Chapter 14. Her name in the paper. The town hall was packed, not with shouting or protest, but with the quiet tension of unspoken history. Folded chairs squeaked as people settled in. The mayor adjusted his tie. The city clerk scribbled notes. And Mama, wearing her Sunday best, stepped up to the podium. She had spoken before, in church, at marches, in whispers, but this was different. This time, they couldn't look away. "My name is Ruth Johnson," she began, her voice calm, carrying. "I live on Maple Street. My daughter was denied schooling. My son was arrested. And last month, someone burned a cross on our porch." No gasps, just silence. "I was raised to believe this town could be better than this. I still believe it." She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She just told the truth. The next morning, the local paper ran a front-page story. "Ruth Johnson speaks for change." Her photo was grainy but clear, her words quoted exactly. Some neighbors called, some brought casseroles. Others didn't say a word but looked at her differently, some with respect, some with fear. At the grocery store, a man muttered "troublemaker" under his breath. Later, someone slashed their tires. But also, someone left a bouquet of sunflowers on their porch. No note. Michael framed the article and hung it in the hallway. "You said it," he told her, "out loud, in their space." Mama smiled, but her eyes held worry. "Now they know my name." And they did. But they also knew her strength. When Mama finally speaks at a town meeting, the local paper prints her name and words. Support rises, but so does the danger. Chapter 15. We kept standing. Autumn came quietly to Maple Street. Leaves turned the color of rust and gold, and the wind carried a hush that felt almost sacred. Life moved on, but it did so with a limp, like a town trying to pretend it hadn't just seen itself in a mirror and flinched. The Johnsons sat on their porch one Saturday afternoon, surrounded by the subtle sounds of a neighborhood relearning how to speak. Abba read aloud from her father's letters, her voice calm and clear. Michael worked on repainting the picket fence, brushing over the damage with slow, deliberate strokes. Mama sat with her sewing, glancing up now and then to wave at the neighbors who passed. Some waved back. A few stopped to talk, others simply nodded. But they all looked. Inside the house, the framed newspaper article still hung on the wall. So did the protest signs. So did the photos Terence had taken, now part of a small exhibit in the town library labeled "Through Our Eyes." The school district had not changed its policy, but a group of parents had started a petition. Michael was no longer seen as just a boy with a sign. He was a voice in the community. Ava had been invited to read her poetry at a youth conference in the city. And Mama remained the anchor, steady, unshaken, fierce. One evening, a new family moved in down the street, black like the Johnsons. As they unpacked, they looked toward the Johnson porch. Michael stood and waved. The father waved back. That night, Mama said, "Maybe it won't be easier for them, but it might not be quite as hard, because they had stayed. When it was easier to leave, when it would have been safer to be silent, they had stood tall. And in doing so, they had bent something in the world, just slightly, toward justice. Not a victory, but a beginning."